Hi, I'm Jan. I love climbing in mountain ranges around the world. I set some world records in the Himalaya, the highest mountains on Earth. I also love to ski and made some wild ski descents in the far corners of our world. You know, I was even part of an expedition to fly a hot air balloon over Mount Everest, our world's highest peak. We crashed, but set a high-altitude flight record in the process. We were all fine, but the balloon wasn't. I did a lot of training and competing to stay in shape for setting these world records. But what meant the most to me was the warm-hearted people that I met as I traveled to these exotic places. So, I eventually left the record-breaking to others and spent my time living with the indigenous people on each continent. I feel these ancient cultures have so much to teach us. I wanted to learn from them before it was no longer possible. You can learn from them too. Come meet my friends, the Sherpas and Tibetans in the Himalaya, located on the opposite side of the earth from us here in the United States. Here, the people dress differently, eat differently, and even their daily customs are quite unlike ours. The Sherpas I met live in homes made of stone and mud and a little wood. They cook over an open fire right inside their homes. They don't use chimneys, but place woven mats over holes in the roofs so the smoke can escape. These yaks are Sherpa trucks. They transport the material goods Sherpas need to survive in the mountains. Although the Sherpas may appear quite different from us, we're all part of the same human family. We all have the same basic needs, like food and shelter, and the same feelings, like happy or sad, regardless of where we live in the world. I brought the book that I authored about the Sherpa culture back to the Himalaya to show my friends. They were pleased that I wanted to get to know them and their way of life. I was glad to be accepted by them as a friend, which made me feel like a real member of our great human family. My book, Himalaya, is about Sonam and Yangshi Sherpa. They live in this village called Namche Bazaar in the Khumbu region. This is the heart of the Sherpa culture, at the confluence or joining of two rivers. Sonam and Yangshi have no running water in their homes. The rivers are the only running water for the Sherpas. Yangshi's mother fills a container at the local stream, which she carries back to the house so Yangshi can wash up. The river is also the local laundromat, where Yangshi's family washes their clothes. When the clothes are rinsed, they're put up on the rock walls to dry. In the small plots of earth surrounded by these rock walls, the Sherpas can grow just a few things, like potatoes. These women harvest their potatoes, boil and peel them, then slice them up before they lay them out to dry. When the slices are very dry, they're called rigishakpa. They remind me of our potato chips. But the Sherpas need more than potatoes to live on. They couldn't survive this high up in the mountains without the yak, this strong, shaggy beast. The butter alone from a yak is like money. Anyone will trade for it anytime, anywhere. Yak butter is used in Tibetan tea that's drunk all day long. Yak butter is even used to make candles and sculpture, which is an offering for a blessing of good fortune. Yaks also provide meat, milk, and cheese to eat. Yak wool is woven to make tents and clothing. And can you believe it? Sherpas even use dried yak dung or manure for making fires. Yaks are also Sherpa trucks, carrying trade goods because this high in the mountains there are no roads for vehicles in the Himalaya, only trails for yaks. Yangshi, like most of the Sherpas, has her own yak and has to care for it so that it will grow strong and work hard. Yangshi and Sonam help their mother card yak hair by using these large brushes. Then their mother spins the wool on a stick to make yarn for knitting and weaving clothing and blankets. Yaks originally came from the other side of the Himalaya, from a land called Tibet. As a matter of fact, all Sherpas came from Tibet. Sherpa means East people in the Tibetan language. The Sherpas traveled over the Himalaya and settled in the Khumbu area hundreds of years ago. They brought the religion of Tibetan Buddhism with them. The Sherpas' Buddhist traditions are similar to ours, although they may seem different. In this ceremony, these Sherpas are asking for the good fortune of rain to water their fields so they can grow many potatoes. These men are chanting prayers as they beat their drum and are throwing rice, much like we throw rice at a wedding to wish the bride and groom good fortune. This ceremony is a puja, or house blessing, where relatives and friends have gathered to pray. These men in the red robes are monks. They are spiritual teachers like our priests, ministers, and rabbis. Many ceremonies take place at the monastery where the monks live, which is much like our church, synagogue, or temple. I like to respect the customs of the people I'm visiting. This shows them that I want to learn about their way of life. By spinning the prayer wheels outside the monastery, I send prayers of good fortune. Spinning the wheels gives the Sherpa people great comfort as they pass by their local monastery. The prayers printed on these wheels say, Om Mani Padme Hum, which literally means the jewel is in the lotus. My Sherpa friends have taught me that it means sacredness or peace is inside you. The monks also print prayers on light fabric to make flags that blow in the wind. They believe that every time the flag flutters in the wind, prayers are being said for everyone's good fortune. The idea is to devote prayers for everyone, not just for yourself. I also saw mani stones, small stones carved with prayers piled high along the trails as I trekked. Even the Sherpas on the trail greeted me by saying, Namaste, which means the spirit in me honors the spirit in you. These Sherpa people have taught me in so many ways that they have a strong belief in the spiritual nature of our human family. I began to feel as if my trek were an endless prayer. Large yak trains brought the Tibetans and this Buddhist culture to the Khumbu long ago, and it's the yaks that are also taking the Sherpas of the Khumbu into the future. Today, yaks make it possible for tourists to trek or hike in the heart of the Himalaya by carrying their supplies and equipment. Yongshi and Sonam's father, Anu, works with climbers and trekkers and outfits them with Sherpa guides and yaks to carry their tents and food into the high mountains. When I was climbing in the Himalaya, Anu went with us to the mountains around Mount Everest, the highest peak on Earth. It took many yaks to get us into base camp with all of our gear. Expeditions such as mine have become a new way for Sherpas to make a living, as well as outfitting people who don't come to climb but come only to trek. We couldn't have had a successful expedition without the support of the Sherpas and their yaks. Chomolungma, which means Mother Goddess of the Earth, is the local name for Everest. She's actually a very young mountain and still growing at the rate of about 1/4 of an inch each year. Throughout time, the continents have been shifting, and these great land masses sometimes collide. 100 million years ago, India began moving towards Asia. When they connected, India slid under Asia. The rock between them was squeezed and pushed up, forming the Himalaya. Everest is 29,028 feet high, about 5 miles above sea level, and still rising, as is all of the Himalaya, because of the continual pressure of India against Asia. This growing wall of mountains causes the monsoon rains traveling from the south to fall in Nepal. When these rains hit this rock barrier, it makes Nepal lush and green, but leaves Tibet on the north side a desert. Since Everest was first climbed by Sir Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay in 1953, the Himalaya has become a tremendous draw for people of every nation. This has created a great problem. This mountainous land that used to support only a few Sherpas now has thousands of trekkers each year traveling through it from all over the world. Just to feed this number of people each year causes a tremendous demand for firewood used for cooking. Not only that, but many trekkers choose to stay in the homes of the Sherpas instead of tents. As a result, the Sherpas have begun to build new lodges to house the growing number of trekkers. This has created even more demand for wood. In the past, Sherpas used dried yak dung for burning in their fires instead of wood. But with the increasing number of visitors to feed, there's not enough yak dung to make fires for cooking more food. The Sherpas now need more trees. With this large number of trees being cut down, there are not enough left on the steep hillsides to hold the soil in place when the monsoon rains pour down every year. So the land, which is the heart of the Himalaya, is washing into the rivers and all the way out to the sea, into the Bay of Bengal. The land is already washed away behind this Gunsar settlement where the Sherpas are growing crops. The local people are so concerned about what's happening that they wrote this sign in English, hoping that trekkers would understand the problems they're causing to this beautiful land. The local Sherpas are asking the visitors to be responsible and not burn wood, or allow the Sherpas to burn wood for them. Trekkers can and should use light camp stoves to cook their food instead of wood, and can use tents instead of lodges. But it is a difficult situation because many of the poor Sherpas need to earn money for their families and are willing to cut trees for the money. They never had to think about the number of trees cut down before, with only their small population in the area. Now, with so many foreign visitors, they must learn to find a way to preserve their forests and land. Now that you know something about the life of the Sherpas, come with me and saddle up some yaks. We'll load them with trade goods to learn about life on a trade caravan. We'll travel this 50-mile-long ancient salt trade route beginning here in the village of Namche Bazaar, crossing over the mountains on the great glaciers into Tibet. The Sherpas have developed a sustainable system of trade here in Namche Bazaar, halfway between the lowlands of Nepal and the highlands of Tibet. Instead of shopping at the supermarket like we do, the Sherpas gather once a week, every Saturday, in Namche Bazaar for a grand market. Here, people often barter or trade for the things they need instead of using money. Because some Sherpas must trek great distances to get to the Saturday market, they need to trade for supplies that will last them for weeks or months. The people from the lowlands trek up carrying rice and millet or chickens and eggs because these things can survive at a lower elevation where it's lush, green, and warmer. They carry these trade items in woven baskets on their backs. They trek only to Namche because lowland people are accustomed to lower altitudes. Their bodies are not adjusted to going higher than Namche. They do not have the clothing and equipment to travel over the ice and snow all the way to Tibet. The Tibetans bring many things from the highlands on the other side of the Himalaya. The most common are tea and salt. The Tibetans don't go lower than Namche because their yaks become sick below 12,000 feet. They are high-altitude animals, and the elevation of Namche Bazaar is as low as they can go. I traded for rice at the Saturday market and hired some of Anu's yaks. I headed for Tibet with my friend Gurmi. I was traveling light because soon I'd be traveling alone, carrying everything on my back over the mountains. I met with Kanjo Chumbi to talk about the history of the trade route. Kanjo's grandfather had written documents organizing trade over the Himalaya on this ancient salt trade route I was traveling on. I found it incredible that rare items like Chinese silk and Indian coral crossed the Himalaya on the backs of yaks, then on the backs of local people, all the way from China to India. And it was the Sherpas that organized this international trade before we had ships, planes, and trains. I spent the night just below the Tami Monastery in a tea house, which is a Sherpa home open to all passing travelers to buy or barter for simple foods like eggs and potato dumplings. Today the magic began. Traveling from Tami up the Bodhikosi or Tibetan River is like going back in time. No trekkers or foreigners are allowed up this river valley spilling into Tibet. I was given special permission to go on this journey. Many Sherpas and Tibetans travel up and down this valley on trade caravans just like I am. They travel when the weather is good in May and June before the heavy monsoon rains, and in October and November before the cold winter. In this Tami Valley are the Yursa settlements, the high summer pastures for the yaks. Traditional homes in this valley have no glass in the windows, therefore the windows are small. The walls are mud brick, and the woven bamboo maps on the roofs are held down by stones because they have no nails. The stone walls enclose the pastures for different herds of yaks. Whole families move up to these summer camps to herd the yaks from pasture to pasture to find new green grass to eat. I was reminded of my childhood herding cows on our Vermont dairy farm as I drove my yaks up to the last place that potatoes can grow, called Maryalung. In this valley, all doors are open to visitors to spend the night. After Gurmi and I unloaded the yaks, Didi, which means sister in Sherpa, invited me into her home and fed me potatoes and tea. I felt welcome and offered her a warm ski hat in trade for a night's sleep, which she accepted with a big smile, feeling she got the better end of the deal. Of course, I felt like I was the lucky one to receive this acceptance without question, even though rodents ran over me all night as I lay in my sleeping bag by the dying fire. Made it to Lunak, Black Country. I've seen the last of the grass. I have to ration what little hay I have to feed my yaks today. I have only a few provisions for myself, like cheese and dried meat, to get me to Tibet in the next 3 or 4 days. Gurmi will be taking the yaks back tomorrow because there's been too much snow this spring covering the new grass. So they're not strong enough to cross the Himalayan mountain pass, the Nangpa, which is about 20,000 feet in elevation. Once Gurmi turns back, I will be on my own. No one lives here in Lunak, like the Yursa settlements, because it's too high for anything to grow. It's the last permanent shelter before crossing the Nangpa. But this little cluster of stone huts can be a busy place. A lot of trading goes on here, because all traders, both Tibetan and Sherpa, share these huts. There are 2 types of traders, those trading as a business with large yak caravans, and those carrying their own personal trade goods on their backs, trading only for their extended family, maybe once a season. Traders often barter here at Lunak, trying to get a better deal before the goods get to the markets at either ends of the trade route and become more expensive. Lunak was empty when I arrived because of late April snows, which slowed the trade to a halt. I missed Didi's company, her tea and potatoes, even her rodents. But Still, I'm determined to position myself to cross the mountains when the snow is settled and it's safer. Today I crossed only moraine, broken rock that is constantly shifting. This rock was dropped by the glacier, a long frozen river that melts on its journey down the valley. Walking on moraine is like walking on miles and miles of rolling bowling balls. And to think, this valley is the equivalent of our superhighways in the U.S. This is a Himalayan highway, and the yaks are the trucks. My Sherpa friends consider this area spooky because they believe this is the home of the Yeti, similar to Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Pasang Wangchu, a Tibetan Lama, had his own Yeti tales to tell me. One of the yaks broke through the snow and ice, and Gurmi and I dug his leg out in a hurry to make sure he hadn't broken it in the fall. This accident reminded me that all glacier travel must occur early in the morning while everything is still frozen before it turns into knee-deep slush in the middle of the day. The yak was all right, but Gurmi was anxious to get the yaks down lower because it was obvious the yaks were too weak to make it over the Nangpa. So, Gurmi would turn back with the yaks and I'd push on alone. After I said my goodbyes to Gurmi, I realized how alone I was. I'm settled in my camp at the base of the glacier of the Nangpa. I miss the sound of the yak bells outside my tent, the comfort of knowing company and transportation is available. I'm alone, feeling unimportant and very small compared to the big cliffs and glaciers surrounding me in my fragile tent. The weather's getting worse, penning me in. This is my third night here, still penned in by storms. I feel too sick to move. My food is all gone, and I barely have enough gas to melt snow in the water. With this bad weather, it seems impossible that any traders will be coming through the pass. I wonder how long this will go on. I wonder how long I can go on. I even feel too weak to write. Nothing has changed. Waiting for a break in the weather is giving me too much time to think. I remember when I left for this trip, my worried father said, "I didn't raise you to do these things." Maybe he was right. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Why did I think I could do this alone? Last night was unbelievable. The storm was horrendous. In the middle of the night, I turned on my headlamp because I was so discouraged. I needed to read a letter I brought with me from a friend for encouragement one more time. Then, suddenly, I was shocked when my tent was unzipped and two frightened pairs of eyes peered in. Apparently, my light had attracted two Sherpas, a father and a son caught in the storm with no place to go. They immediately pointed to my down parka and sleeping bag as if to trade, but I motioned for them to come in with me where they would be more safe and much warmer. They saw how sick I was and brewed something for me that gave me strength to get up by morning. I gave them some colorful scarves, and they left me with tsampa to eat, the same mixture of ground barley and tea I'd been giving to my yaks. My confidence has returned. I can do this. Then, What I'd been so anxiously anticipating since the beginning of this journey suddenly appeared. I saw a train of about 40 yaks and herders from Tibet crossing over the glacier, a traditional yak caravan. I was determined to get to meet them when they settled in for tea after crossing the Nangpa before they continued on down the valley. We traded small items like my fingernail clippers for their sampa. I was amazed by the traders balancing on the shifting moraine while carrying loads of up to 70 pounds or more on their backs. I crossed over the Nangpa today. Skies were clear, and it was cold and frozen. I slid over on my skis, avoiding the crevasses, which are gaps or cracks in the glacier where it covers steep terrain. If I fell into a crevasse, there would be a good chance of never coming out again. It took the largest part of the day, but I felt strong and was safe, and met some Tibetans crossing over to Nepal, who took my photo to record my crossing. At the height of the pass, the Tibetans had hung their traditional prayer flags for a safe journey. Out of respect for their culture, I tied up some flags too. From where I stood, I could look right into the Changtang, or Northern Plateau, the largest natural area in Tibet, covering half the country, 1 million square kilometers. The Changtang has one of the worst climates on Earth, with temperatures dropping lower than 40 degrees below zero in the windy winter. But what makes the Changtang so valuable is that it is brackish or salty, so salty that you can scoop up the salt with your bare hands right off the ground. This is why the trade route over the Nangpa began in the first place, to bring salt to Nepal and India on the other side of the Himalaya. I spent my first night in Tibet. I slept on the moraine in Zapoa last night. These trading huts in Zapoa reminded me of the huts in Lunok on the other side, except that there are traders here now that the weather has improved. I met Dawa. He knew he would make some great trades with me because of my scarves, jewelry, and my down clothing. He offered to take my load with his on his horse to the village of Tingri, the site of his Saturday market and the end of the trade route. Although Dawa had chosen to remain in Tibet, many Tibetans have been traveling over the Nangpa to live permanently in the area of Namche and beyond because China has taken control of Tibet. Most Tibetans prefer their own ruler, the Dalai Lama, instead of the Chinese government, so they leave to practice their own religion and way of life in Nepal or India, where the Dalai Lama now lives. The Dalai Lama left Tibet for freedom and to preserve the Tibetan culture. Dawa and I walked 30 miles across the flat, dry Tibetan plateau, 15,000 feet high. Here, the base of the mountains begin 1,000 feet higher than the tops of the highest peaks in the Colorado Rockies and the California Sierra. When we stopped to brew up tea along the way, I felt a sense of great distance and as if time had stopped. When we reached Khumbu, the first village across the plain, I noticed these manure paddies from the yaks and horses drying on the outside wall. When we went inside Dawa's friend's home, I watched them crumble up manure and light it on fire to make a Tibetan microwave. Horse and yak dung was their only fuel for cooking. No trees can grow this high. All the locals, especially the women, were very interested to see me, a woman trader from another land. They were both very curious and very friendly. The Tibetans have a peaceful culture. as exemplified by their leader, the Dalai Lama. On our way from Khumbu to Dawa's home in Tingri, we passed by homes built like condominiums, with masses of cooking dung or manure drying on their roofs. Dawa left his horse at home and continued with me to Gangar, the marketplace. He'd been trying to tell me something for days. When I'd mentioned Gangar, he'd just shake his head, so I wasn't surprised when the marketplace was completely empty. The Chinese had shut down this ancient trade route between Nepal and Tibet because too many Tibetans had been leaving the country and not returning. Many Sherpas and Tibetans used to keep a home in both Nangpa and Tingri for trade purposes, but are no longer allowed to. This market should have looked just as busy as the Saturday market in Nangpa Bazaar. However, I did meet a Chinese doctor at the marketplace. He told me that even though he was Chinese, the Tibetan people liked him because he would ride his horse to the far villages to treat the sick. But he said that even though he was respected, he wouldn't travel without the safety of a horse with a small pistol in his handbag. He wanted to know how I managed my trip as a single female with no horse or no weapon. I told him that through Dawa, these people have become my friends, and that I never carry a weapon to threaten anyone, and I travel on foot, just like the locals do. This way, I feel many more people will trust and accept me. We returned to Dawa's house, and after tea with his wife and children, I gave him my bag of rice. I certainly didn't need it. Then, he put a small wooden bowl in my hands and placed his hands over mine. When I stopped to think about all that I'd been through, this final trade with Dawa brought me to tears. Not far from my great trading adventure with Dawa and his friends stands an amazing building, a giant Himalayan palace. This is called the Potala Palace. It was the home of generations of Dalai Lamas until the present Dalai Lama fled to India when the Chinese took over. I felt sad to know that Dawa and my other friends had an empty Potala palace, and that monasteries such as these were destroyed or closed to the Tibetan people. Once a year, under the full moon of spring, the greatest Himalayan festival of them all is celebrated. It's called Mani Rimdu. It's both a dance drama and a prayer ceremony. Although Mani Rimdu originated in Tibet, it cannot be performed there because of the Chinese takeover. Fortunately, it's still celebrated by the Sherpas at the Tami Monastery on the other side of the Himalaya in the Khumbu region of Nepal. Sherpas and Tibetans trek for days to reach this 3-day celebration, with individual blessings given the first day, dances on the second most lively and crowded day, and the destruction of the mandala on the third day. Incense and juniper are burned before and during the dances to purify the air. Beautiful yak butter sculptures are made as offerings to the spirits. The monks have no written books for the order of dances. It's an oral tradition, stories passed on from one to another. These fantastic masks represent divine beings, and the monk wearing the mask is believed to become that being while he dances. It's also believed that even those watching the ceremony will receive a blessing simply by watching. The purba, or dagger, is whirled during the dances to destroy the evil forces. Inside the monastery, the mandala, a beautiful sand painting, sits under cover, representing the harmony achieved by a truly enlightened mind. At the end of Mani Rimdu, the mandala is poured down the river because it's sacred, to show that we should not try to hold on to material things, that it's the flow of life, like the river, that is important. We learn about Tibet's past through celebrations like Mani Rindu, oral history, and rituals handed down from generation to generation. By understanding the progress and the problems of this culture's past, together, all cultures can create a peaceful and productive future. And so I say namaste. Like the Sherpas and the Tibetans, the spirit in me honors the spirit of life in you. Until we meet again, namaste.